Well, it's 1973. Frank is on his way out to the western Colorado. We're here in eastern Colorado. We have a new tent this year. We bought it just before leaving to go on a camping trip. And here Frank is fixing himself for breakfast in the middle of the Great Plains, the treeless plains, except for where planted around houses. It's early in the morning. The weather is very cool and comfortable. Frank is taking his own sweet time. The interstate highway is in the background, and every now and then a car will go sliding by, but we're not ready for the out trip yet. We're going to enjoy a nice meal. That's what we're going to do. Fresh eggs in the high altitudes, 6,000 feet above sea level, taste awfully good. He's ready to go. Now for the removal of the tent. The town is Silverton, a very small village on the plains of eastern Colorado. Wheat area here, and one of the key points of the town is the front grain elevator, which we saw in the first shots. There's really little else here except that. We had intended to stop at Flagler, which was about 15 or 20 miles further east, but Flagler's tinning facilities were nil, so we landed up at Silverton. As I said, the altitude here is roughly 6,000 feet high above sea level. The air is very rarefied, and therefore you don't really hurry to do much of anything. Otherwise you end up restless. After crossing the front range, we now top Wilkinson Pass, and before us lies South Park, one of the three great flat valleys of central Colorado between the mountains, completely surrounded by snow-capped mountains. All of these mountain ranges range from 14,000 to 15,000 feet high. That's about 45 miles across that valley we were just looking at. Before leaving, a little bit of the wildlife comes to investigate. He isn't quite sure he trusts these peculiar looking animals that's trying to feed him. Wildlife is very prominent and noticeable in the Rockies, and most of them are fairly tame, such as here. And overlooking Frank as he feeds the ground squirrel, there's a bird, also quite tame, sitting here watching, but ready to go. Another long distance, and we find ourselves leaving Ouray, headed up the Box Canyon toward Engineer Mountain and Red Mountain. This road along the side of this mountain, which you can see here, originally started as an automobile's toll road in the late 1800s. A shelf carved out of the side of the solid rock mountains has been widened. A tunnel has been built, but it's still quite a scary drive for a stranger who's not used to driving mountain roads. Here we look back toward Ouray. This road goes from Ouray across Red Mountain Pass and then down into Silverton. Now you can see why this is called Red Mountain Pass. Due to the chemical consistency of the rocks in this vicinity, quite a few oxides of iron, I think. Most of the these several mountains in here are bright red, and against the greenery that surrounds their lower slopes, it's very interesting to look at. We are now reaching the level of about 11,000 feet as the road climbs up to cross over Red Mountain Pass. As a result, we begin to see snow. This area for many, many years has been a great mining area. Ouray, Silverton, all those are mining towns. The mines, some are still active, but most of them have long since been abandoned. And in these views we can see many of the leftover and abandoned mine claims of the past 100 years. Silver and gold mostly, left and deserted. At the top of the mountains, covered by eternal snow, above the timberline, we still see the red rocks showing through. You can see where the ground is slid during various years. Here's one where we have a definite landslide. It's red in the snow with the red rocks. In this big saddle between the two mountains, the summer sun is melting the snow. The snow trickles down the side of the hill, joins other trickles, becomes a stream, a rushing stream, icy cold, foaming, roaring, as it goes downhill, around curves, across rocks, gathering speed, gathering momentum and force, foam and beauty, and suddenly over the edge and into a 250-foot waterfall. Frank would like to investigate further this beautiful mountain stream. Get a drink of that good water. I imagine the water would be quite pure since it's come out right out of the snow on the top of Red Mountain. Well, we now approach the actual pass at 11,500 feet. One of the higher passes of the Rocky Mountains in southwestern Colorado, and of course still in the snow-capped mountain area. Crossing the pass, we find ourselves looking into the little valley in which Silverton is located. Nestled completely between the mountains, Silverton is the high end of the famous Durango-Silverton old-time narrow-gauge railroad train operated by the Rio Grande. Twice each day during the summer, one of these trains comes into Silverton from the climb from Durango. Here's the second train just coming in, 473. Narrow gauge, 3-foot, wide tracks. This train is tired. He's ready to rest. He's just climbed 3,500 feet in the last 45 miles, pulling this train up this narrow gauge railroad along the valley of the Los Animos River, through some of the most spectacular scenery in the United States. Even this town is located there. Every day, just about 1 o'clock, the whistle blows, and the first train, followed an hour later by the second train, slowly backs down to the Y, reverses itself, and progresses back down toward Durango. It's mostly a coast going back. He's had his work coming up. This is the Los Animos River here, which the train is going alongside of. This is the narrow gauge train. His maximum speed probably is about 20 to 25 miles an hour, even in the better stretches. And most other places, 15 miles an hour might not be too bad a speed for him. This is partly because of the narrow gauge, partly because of the sharpness of the curves. This is not a curve here, but there are plenty further down the river. And notice the train pulls quite a string of cars. During the tourist season, they have as many as 2,000 people a day come up on this train, the two trains together. And so the train winds its way down, and finally, about 2 hours, 3 hours later, ends back up in Durango, Colorado, where it is home for the engines. These narrow gauge engines have inside frames outside frames, I beg your pardon, outside frames, which puts the wheels on the inside. This gives them an opportunity to have a wider engine and therefore more power. This also makes it very hard for you to see the actual wheels. All you really see is the counterweights. Well, after a hard day's work, it's time for the old girl to go over here and rest for the night. These are quite powerful engines, squat way down on the ground. The earlier narrow gauge engines sat in the normal fashion with inside frames, outside wheels, but were very puny and not very powerful. It took some time, 3 or 4 of them, to pull a normal train up the incline from Durango. We've now proceeded out of Colorado and into Arizona and northeast Arizona, where Frank has been desiring to go to see the great Monument Valley. Our first views of rugged countryside are soon past, and we see the long stretch of 30 miles of road going from Cayenta over to the valley, which Frank has been wanting to see. The Monument Valley is used quite a bit as a movie setting. Most people have probably seen movies that were placed in Monument Valley with these huge monoliths and buttes. Merrick Butte on one side, Mitten Buttes, what looks like mittens, can be seen at times. Merritt was a man who was captured by Indians. He escaped, and in trying to get away, the Indians caught and killed him at the foot of Merritt Butte. Here you can see the Mitten Buttes and the others. This is all Indian territory. Navajo Indians own this land. This is an Indian reservation. Actually, we are foreigners, so to speak. It is very dry, and today the temperature must be at least 115. Very hot. Even the wind has no cooling power at all. Here's one of the Mitten Buttes. Here's another one. These are very famous pieces. Most people are familiar with those because of their odd shapes. This is Merritt Butte. The road Frank is walking on probably is used for movie making as a stagecoach road. And so the road proceeds between these huge buttes. Actually, these buttes are over 1,000 feet high. They don't look that big, but they're equivalent to full-size mountains out in the east. And it's 3 to 5 miles away from us here too. The air in the Monument Valley is so sparklingly clear that actually more problems arise in preventing the sky from being too blue and the air too crisp than any other thing that would normally bother photographers. You do not use filters. Now the road passes immediately to the base, and we see beyond the wide valley of the San Juan River with very interesting erosion patterns in the far side of its bank. The San Juan River is one of the largest rivers of the territory, ends up going into the Colorado and the Grand Canyon. Our route leads us through Utah, northward, until we come to Arches National Park. This is one of the newest national parks in the United States, and one of the items that gives us its name is the windows section with numerous large, huge arches that have been carved into the rock by erosion, primarily by wind. This was originally sand, and it was compressed into sandstone. And later, due to the buckling of the earth, it fractured. The fractures were about 10 feet apart. The water seeping into the cracks eventually eroded away this sandstone, causing narrow fin-like devices. This is turret arch. These devices slowly crumbled beneath due to the curving structure of the sand dunes from which it was made, leaving these fantastic arches. This is one of the largest. This is the window arch. The stonework in the Arches Park, especially in this vicinity of these particular arches, is real fantastic. This is the same arch looking up and up and up. Up near the top right overhead, there's one large boulder hanging there that looks like it just should turn loose and fall. But I don't imagine it will anytime soon. You can see the cracks between the two ridges here. Frank has changed sides while we've been zooming over, and he's now on the other end of the arch. And following this, walking off back to the car, we see the fighting elephants. Right over there. As I said, many of these stones take on weird and odd shapes. You can very easily see where the name of this one comes from. It's actually very eerie to drive in amongst these huge 400 and 500 foot monoliths and other formations and visualize and see these strange formations and images that are in stone. There's a statue of old Burnsides over there. And this is the lone warrior kneeling in prayer before going into battle. Also a very interesting rock formation in this area is the balancing rock, which as one looks at it, it seems hard to understand how it can manage to stand up. It seems off balance and off to one side. However, it is in perfect balance. That rock is roughly the size of 2 or 3 houses. Now we leave the arches and head down toward the entrance of the park through the big valley that is washed away, leaving these formations that we've been seeing. We'll come to another section. This is considered as courthouse rocks. In these shots, you can very easily see the formation of the rock and the sand in its layers, with this huge thick layer, which is the one that helped to form these fantastic shores. This apparently was at one time the shores of a very huge ocean or sea. You can see a very small arch here just beginning to form down under the bottom. That will enlarge as millions of years go by and eventually form an arch like the one we saw a while ago. They seem to hang right over our heads as we drive slowly by. Courthouse Towers is near the entrance to the park. It is a badly eroded, but not to the extent of the windows section yet, and therefore the monoliths and walls are still vertical, flat, and solid in most cases. And so we bid farewell to Frank's trip to the west, to Colorado, Arizona, and Utah. A final glimpse is of the mountains to the east, around which we will go. These are the mountains we were in earlier.